This is episode 37 with author, TEDx speaker, and business consultant, Youre Gassner. Hello and welcome to another episode of the UV Effect podcast. My name is Gabrielle Jordan. I am the creator and host of the show, and today we're going to be speaking with our guest, Youre Gassner. And she is a author, a speaker, spoken on TEDx, on inbound stages, and she's also a business consultant. She started a company called Limitless Possibilities, and she's written multiple books. One of the books is Mission Driven. But today, what we're going to be discussing is something very interesting to me, and I think it might be interesting for you guys. So Youre Gassner, she's a big philanthropist. She's done much for her community and for the world. I would say Youre has helped to build local Montessori school. She's co-founded Women's Philanthropic Initiative, advised and started up National Women's PAC, which is PAC, grew a Citizens Leadership Development Program, and multiple other things. So her list goes on and on when it comes to her philanthropic efforts. But what's funny is, in this episode, or really what her mission has been for a while now, is all about the myth of self-importance when it comes to giving back. So that might be a bit of when you first hear that, you might seem a little confused, might seem a little controversial, might seem a little weird. And she's going to get into what that really means, the myth of self-importance when it comes to giving back and such in philanthropy. We're going to get into what that means and actually why it is important to understand what this myth is, this myth of self-importance, and realize that a lot of us have this. So before we get into it, let me just give you a little bit of explanation. But basically, at Inbound, if you guys know, I spoke at Inbound last year, and she was there as well. She was going on before me, and she discussed, this was her topic, the myth of self-importance, and she discussed how, she gave an example of specifically how when there was the shooting, the Sandy Hook shooting, people had sent bears, thousands and thousands of bears, to cheer up these children, which is such a beautiful thing. People had this instinct to want to do something to give back, and they sent all of these bears to these children. But what ended up happening was that it piled up. The amount of bears they had piled up, and most of it had to be thrown away. And, bears aren't really biodegradable, so, it wasn't very helpful for many, and also they had to probably hire more people just to be able to dispose of the bears and things like that. And so, yes, it was a beautiful show. It was a kind thing people thought, but what happens is that when people think about, they see something terrible in the news and they want to do something about it, oftentimes we think, first with our emotions instead of our heads, and we often end up doing things that aren't as helpful as we think they are. And so Miss Youre is all about helping us figure out what it is that we can do that'll actually be effective, and not just thinking that we have to do something. Sometimes we don't have to do something. Maybe we need to send this to someone else that's better for this. And maybe there's another opportunity where maybe it's not doing, going to the eye of the storm. Maybe it's kind of being on the ridge of the storm and doing some work there. So basically, it's all about figuring out what it is that you can do best and how you can do it best and why you should do it or why you shouldn't do it. So it's actually really ties, as we talk about in this episode, it ties so well with the UV Effect podcast and with the UV Effect and unique value and understanding what makes us important and, why we're so capable of doing the things that we are meant to do on this earth. Those two things, this understanding of how we can help people better and the best way to do that mixes so well with, the UV Effect podcast and the UV Effect. So, of course, you're going to hear more about that in this episode. We're going to explain this more. Youre Gassner is going to be explaining this more, the myth of self-importance, giving back, philanthropy, more in this episode. So if you're still confused, definitely listen in. She most definitely explains it better than I do. This is her mission, her message. But it's definitely a great one to listen to, especially if you're one that loves to give back and do great things. This probably will help you to define what it is that you do best when it comes to giving back to people. Maybe it's just giving money, or maybe it's, going into the streets and protesting. But this is a great one just to kind of help you figure out how you can best affect the world, especially at this point in time where there's a lot of people, a lot of things, people wanting to help and change and fix. So, definitely keep listening on. It's a great episode, and I hope that you enjoy hearing this message with Miss Youre Gassner. Thank you so much for joining me on the UV Effect podcast.
Hi, how are ya?
I am doing good. Thank you again. I really appreciate you being here. Miss Laura, you guys heard in the intro that Miss Laura is a pretty successful entrepreneur. She started multiple different programs and businesses, and you guys heard all this before. So I want to now just jump straight into this interview, and I want to talk to you about this message that you have developed. But first, let's go into your story. Let's go into where you got started and how you got to this place that you are now.
So, crazily, my first actual real grown-up job was in the White House.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I had other jobs. My first actual paid job was making fresh vegetable juices at a health restaurant in Miami. And my second actual paid job was changing bedpans at a hospital. So not exactly glamorous work, but my first actual real job was in the White House. I had heard then candidate Bill Clinton talking about this idea of service, of college tuition in exchange for community service. And I thought that makes so much sense. And I dropped out of law school and I joined this campaign. And the next thing you know, I end up in the White House helping create the national service program that would become AmeriCorps. And it was in that experience that I realized that the highest and best use of my time was to help get the right people in the right places so that they could change the world. And so 4 years later, when Bill Clinton was running for re-election, I thought, great, I'm going to go back on the campaign trail again because I'm 25 and I'm ready to, do it again. And my mentor at the time said, you're kind of too old to get back on a campaign bus and eat cold pizza and sleep in high school gymnasiums. And you're kind of too young to be the domestic policy advisor. So go talk to my friend who's a recruiter for nonprofits. He'll find you a job in a nonprofit. You'll hide out for 4 years, and then you'll come back and do something big on the Gore campaign. And I thought, great, that makes tons of sense. And I went to go talk to the guy, and he said, well, you don't want to go work in a nonprofit. You want to work for me, and I'll teach you everything there is to know about nonprofits and social change and mission. And our work is in Boston. And I thought, the boy I'm dating, who I think is the guy I'm going to marry, P.S., spoiler alert, I did marry him, he's going to move to Boston, and the job is in Boston. Great, I'll take it. Okay, now what do you do? And I became a headhunter. And for 20 years, I spent my time recruiting leaders for nonprofit, mission-driven foundations, universities, research institutions, advocacy organizations. And 5 years into it, realized that I could do things better and smarter and faster and with more authenticity and integrity than the old white dudes were doing it. And I had a moment of rage and I started my own company. And for 15 years, I ran an exceptionally successful recruiting company that really redefined the way search was done in the nonprofit space. 2 years ago, I sold the firm to my team and I started on this journey of becoming a speaker, and the rest is history.
That is really interesting too. I think as I was looking at your bio, there were a few different things that you had started. Like I guess there were companies, like initiatives that you started. But I don't know, was it recently that you started Limitless Possibility? Is that a company? Right, that's a company, right?
That's a company. So when I sold my company to my team, I had this almost like a crisis of identity. Like, who am I now? And I'm no longer Laura Gassner Otting, CEO of the search firm. And so I needed like a place to land. And what I realized was the part of the work of search that was most interesting to me was that moment of limitless possibility. When an organization is ready to scale, when they're looking for new leadership, when they've got additional funding, when all of a sudden success on a different level is possible, and they're excited by it, and they need the right leader or the right strategy or the right person in the sidecar to help get them there, to take the spaghetti and help make it into structure. And they need the confidence to make those decisions and to take those chances. And so I named the company Limitless Possibility because that's the piece that causes me the most joy, where I think I can be the fulcrum point to make the most change for them.
That's fantastic. And as I hear your story, actually, it sounds to me that, giving and working to help in some way has always been like something that you've just been naturally attracted to, right? That's kind of been where you've been focused on wanting to be on that campaign trail and wanting to even, work at a nonprofit, or even though that was just kind of the direction you were guided into, it was still something that you were thinking about as a possibility. And it seems like something that you're very passionate about, especially to this day, as you talk about something that is very, very intriguing. So in September 2017, we were both speaking at a large event called Inbound, and it's internationally known, and it's for businesses and marketers and all different kinds of people. And I had the pleasure of being able to hear your speech because I was coming on right after you.
Thank God, because I could not have followed you. I mean, you were like amazing. Like,
Thank you.
The room was spellbound. I'm so glad that I was first.
But no, I mean, honestly, when we came in and I saw the title of your presentation, that already got me. So the title was called The Myth of Self-Importance. So right there, I was like, oh, wow, okay, I think I'm going to like this a lot. And then you got into talking, you started talking about what you were talking about. And it was so intriguing. Everything just came together, and it clarified things to me that I had thought about so many times, and it gave me a whole new perspective. And it was kind of controversial only in the sense that it's something unfamiliar in the way that you talked about it, and the way that you come at a sense of finding a problem where many people didn't think there really was. And I really love that. So with all that buildup going on, I want you to talk about this concept that you speak about often now, where basically you're saying that people should stop asking, how can I help?
Yeah. So spending the last 25 years working with people that are in politics and service, and I fully believe the Muhammad Ali quote that service is the rent we pay for living on earth. I mean, it is what we should be doing. We all can serve. And Martin Luther King said, everyone is great because everyone can serve. And I believe that deep in my bones. But I think that we have, and so we spend our days
you're
thinking about how can I be of service?
Hold on, sorry, you're it's getting a little choppy. Can you go back to the point you said we spend our days? Can you just start from there? Because it got chopped up and I couldn't hear you.
Yeah. So should I just start with my answer? Where I started from before? I'm not sure what you caught.
You can start from your answer then.
Okay. So in spending 25 years working in behalf of organizations that were service-oriented, I obviously fell in love with service. I think that I believe the Muhammad Ali quote that service is the rent we pay for living on earth. I mean, that is absolutely in my bones. And at the same time, I also believe deeply that, with Martin Luther King, who said that everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And so we spend this time in this quest for this idea of servant leadership, right? And what happens is that we spend so much time thinking about the service part of servant leadership that we forget the leadership part of servant leadership. And what happens is we have started to conflate the idea of service and sacrifice. And so we don't realize what service means. We feel like we can't serve others unless we're sacrificing of ourselves. It doesn't feel like we're really giving unless we're giving off of our own back. And that's not necessarily always right. And in fact, it's not always necessarily productive. And it got me realizing that it all comes from this myth of self-importance that we have. We believe that we have to do all the things all the time. So you have to be at every meeting. You have to be at every fundraiser. You have to bake every cupcake for every school function. And the truth is that the carrots don't taste any better because you've chopped them or someone else has chopped them. They just need to be chopped, right? What needs to happen is they need to be chopped, not you have to do it, because maybe your highest and best use for that fundraiser is to get more people in the room who can give more money. Yeah. But if we're busy chopping carrots, it's not happening. And what I realized is it all starts from us asking the wrong question. When we see something happen in the world, a tragedy, and the first thing we say is, oh my God, how can I help? And so we look at this problem and we define the problem based on ourselves as a solution. How can I help? Means only what I can give in this moment with my time, with my energy, with my resources, with my networks, with my interests, with my limited knowledge. And so we create these beautiful, perfectly executed solutions to problems that we've misdiagnosed. And then we're so frustrated because we're not making enough progress towards the solution. And we can't hand over the reins to anybody else. And we have to be in the middle and the hub and the wheel all the time. and we're not actually solving the big problems. We might feel better, right? We're like creating these short-term cathedrals of comfort when we're sending teddy bears when things go wrong. But it's not actually doing anything. Like you send teddy bears to kids who are shot in a horrible gun violence incident. But what we really need to be doing is we need to be focused on getting better common sense gun control. That's the right. We need to do both, but we do this and then we forget about that. And so we ask this question, how can I help? And we need to be asking a better question, which is what needs to happen? And when we ask what needs to happen, then we understand the entirety of the problem in a way that we can then see where I can actually help, as opposed to shoving the problem into ourselves as a solution.
Everything you said there is pretty incredible. It's really deep. Because you shared so much right there that I think to the general person probably blew their mind for a second. Because I think so many people, you come at a problem and you think, like you said, how can I help? What can I do? But you're saying that it's not always exactly you that has to do something. Maybe it's not just like this one thing that everybody else is doing that you need to do as well. Maybe there's something that you can do specifically that will actually lend to the solution of the problem, not just to comfort someone or not just to do this and that. It's to really create an effective result, right? That is incredible to me. And I think it's a different way of looking at problem solving. It's a different way of looking at giving. It's a different way of just looking at how a person brings themselves to the world and uses their impact in the world. Wow.
So there's like this thing, like this martyrdom Olympics that we have that we're all competing against. Like I, served more, I worked harder, I stayed at work longer, and it's bull. I mean, it's bananas that the fact that the entire nonprofit sector is predicated on this idea that charity is the penance that you pay for doing good, right? The pilgrims coming over to this country created this sector coming out of religion, caritas, with this idea that, they cared about freedom from taxation, right? Being able to make money and going to heaven. And so they created this entire sector based on this idea that if we make money, well, we still have to go to heaven. So what do? So charity is not penance. It's not salvation for the poor, it was salvation for the rich. And so we created this whole sector with this idea that you applaud somebody by how much they give, by putting their name on a wall, as opposed to why they're giving and how they're giving and whether or not they're making impact. And so it's really important as we look at how we solve problems to really be thinking about whether or not we're making impact, because action doesn't equal impact. But we get so busy with the action piece of it, we forget about the impact. And then that causes us to be less confident in our longer term decisions because we're doing this and it's not working. So, I'm on this quest to get people to stop with the martyrdom and stop with the self-importance and to feel like, for example, I'm like a white lady who lives in the suburbs, and the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't really include me on the front lines. I have a role to play. It is important that I play a role in that movement. But my role is not standing in front of the crowd with a megaphone. My role is not, being out there organizing people. My role is probably to use my financial resources to give money so that they can get their things and to be an important ally. Absolutely. But if I'm like, how can I help? And I want to feel good, and that's not my room to be in.
Yeah, no.
And so it's important to understand that.
And I want to add something that my mom, she'd always would tell me that you can't help every cause, like in the sense like you don't have to be a part of every cause. So you saying that like you are not the person who needs to be in the front lines of Black Lives Matter movement is incredibly honest, and we need that honesty because I think you got it.
Yeah. And it's hurtful, right? Like it's like it does not feel good to my ego to know that even though there are things that I know I could do if I was standing in the front lines, that I don't belong there. That's not my place. I belong in a place to help those who are on the front lines in whatever way I can be stronger in their advocacy. Yes. But I should. Sorry. There's puppy here.
It's all good.
So, I think it's important to understand what are the things that we can do. And Nilofer Merchant has this great thing she calls onlyness, where there is a unique place in the world where only we stand, where it is the mix of only our specific knowledge and expertise and network, and we are the only ones in that spot. onlyness. And I think it's important to understand what kind of change you want to make in the world and what are the levers that you personally can use to make that change. And then we owe it to everybody out there to be that person, to stand in that onlyness as strong as we possibly can.
Absolutely. I look at like how I don't know, there's so many people that are doing good just because they feel like that's what they can do and like they have figured out that this is the best way they can do what they need to do. But I know with a lot of people, when it comes to giving, subconsciously it's a little bit selfish, like you were saying before. It's like this sense of where you need to do this in order to, get to heaven or whatever. But
and that's okay. Like, we love the money from those people too. It's all green. It all works.
But what I really love about your concept here is that you're getting people to think, how can I do it better? How can I give better in the best of my ability?
What does the solution need? Not what does my ego need?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
So, we'll all feel great if we have better, early warning and evacuation systems. We're all going to feel great if we have less gun violence. We're all going to feel great if the earth doesn't get hotter and hotter, right? That's all going to be good stuff. Yeah. But each one of us creating our own solution it's inefficient and it's not working. I mean, it's clear that it's not working because we're not solving the problems.
Yeah. Wow. And so, again, the main reason why I really wanted you on the show because my message here is unique value and the UV effect and how understanding your distinct significance can have a positive effect on people's lives and being able to bring that confidently into the world in order to have lasting impact on people.
Yeah.
And so I really love your message because the UV effect and your message can really go hand in hand in the sense where it gives people focus. People are a little bit all over the place with all the different problems and wanting to solve all the problems like you're saying. And so when people can, one, figure out what it is, their unique value, figure out what it is that they are so capable of, their gifts, their talents that they can use the most. And then they can figure out which causes, which problems they can best lend their hand to in order to make the best impact with. And I love that idea of just that focus because so many people just have a lack of focus when it comes to most of things in their life. And then especially when it comes to giving because people think you're supposed to give and you're supposed to give to every cause and everything that's going wrong. But now it's like, let's focus and let's make sure that whatever it is that we're doing it to the best of our ability, just like anything in life. And especially now in giving, you want to be able to make sure that everything that you're doing to the best of your ability. And so I just love how that goes hand in hand. So the question that I have here is, how can someone who wants to help a cause or solve a problem figure out what it is within them that will allow them to best make an effective impact? So by that, I just mean, how can they figure out which causes they should really lend their hand to? How can they figure out, what they would be able to do the most with, and when it comes to themselves, or like being able to find the right solution for something?
Yeah. Well, I think I love what you're doing with the UV effect because I think so much of the change that we're able to make in the world starts with our own confidence, right? Our own confidence in our own power and our own voice. And if you I have a son who's in 9th grade and he runs cross country. And he said to me about a month ago, I think I'm going to try to run with the 11th grade pack today. And I was like, wow, okay. Those are boys that are like on the other side of puberty. They're like 6 inches taller. They've got a longer, leg span. They've got more muscle. Like they're, men. You're like, so boy. And, but I think I'm going to try to run with them. And I said, okay, well, great. Good luck to you. And I picked him up at the end of school and I said, how did it go? And he said, they kicked my butt. I mean, it was really hard, but I kept up with them. And I said, awesome. What are you going to do tomorrow? And he goes, I'm going to do it again. And he had this confidence. He was like, okay, I'm going to do it again and again and again. And then, fast forward a couple weeks and he says, Mom, he goes, I made the varsity team. I'm the only 9th grader who made the varsity team. And I said, that's amazing. Why? And he said, because I made a decision that I belonged with that pack. And I was confident in myself that I could be there. So I went there. And because I was there, they bring along music, and the coach calls them up and says, these are the runners I want you to run against, and here's the time that I expect. And she gives them actively more coaching because I decided that I could be better, because I had the confidence in myself that I deserved to be better if I did the work. I did the work, and now I'm even better because I decided that I belonged here. Now I'm here. And so I think that when we decide with this confidence that we can be great, we can become even greater because of that. And so I love what you're doing with the UV project, because I do think that it does take that decision. And so I think the same thing with social change. I think if you make a decision that there is an issue in the world that just keeps you up at night, that bothers you, that causes you heartache and pain, there is a solution. But you can't start with, what can I do to help? You have to start with, what does the solution need? And then you think about what the solution needs, and it may be that in there's a really natural fit. It may be that there's not a natural fit, and then you have to learn what you have to figure out how to do. So you have to figure out, what gives you confidence? Is it your education? Is it your name? Is it your connections? Is it your moxie? Like, maybe it's just your idealism that like something has to be done and you're just willing to find the solution. But it's a combination of starting from, what is the solution calling for, and then what can I bring to it? So for me, I'm not the smartest person in the world, and I'm not the richest person in the world, but I spent 20 years as a recruiter. That means I have a Rolodex that can choke a horse. So is it, again, to go back to the Black Lives Matter movement for a minute, my job in helping that movement go forward is not to stand on the front lines. It's to help recruit and train and run people of color all across this country so that they become elected officials and policymakers. That's the most important thing that I think we can do, right? If we change policy around the private sector prison industrial complex in our country that's creating mass incarceration, which is disenfranchising so many Black and brown citizens to be able to vote, I think that will change who becomes sheriff in these small towns, right? Like, that for me is a way to like, okay, what the problem needs is, this is the root cause, but I have to get back to that by figuring out. And then I go, okay, well, if that's the root cause, is that we don't have the right policymakers in place. Oh, I can help with that, because I can bring a whole bunch of people who look like me into a room who can then understand this issue and support it in a way that it's not us and them, it's all of us together. So if your listeners are trying to figure out, well, where do I slide in? Where do I start? With the problem is that the ocean's so big and my boat is so small. The first thing you have to figure out is, I can't boil the ocean, but which piece of it? Which piece of it can I, where do I want to go tomorrow? And what's the issue that's bothering me? If I want to solve world hunger, well, that means a few people have to be fed. Which people can I feed? Right? And so starting small, Arthur Ashe has a great quote, which is, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can.
I love that.
And you're always successful if you start where you are, you use what you have, and you do what you can. And that builds confidence, which builds velocity, which changes trajectory, which gets you into the room, which helps you do even more and even bigger.
Yeah. I mean, as I hear specifically there, you were talking about, going back to the Black Lives Matter movement, you were talking about how, you talked about how your place wasn't necessarily in the front lines, but what you could be doing, or what you can do, is bring African Americans in positions and bring them in a place where they can feel like they're equals as well. And that does move forward the movement, because it brings more African American people in power and allows them to have voices as well in a broader stage. And so what I get from
which is a way that's not about me as the solution.
Exactly. And so I'm wondering, do you believe that there is basically a place for everyone, in the sense that when it comes to a way to give or a problem that needs to be solved, is there a place for everyone? Or not, I guess, because what you're saying, I want to say that
I think everyone has a role to play.
Okay. All right. Because I know, also depending on like what someone can offer, because maybe not, because that's actually one question I do have is, just because you want to give to something or want to support something, does that mean that you always have to? Because maybe it's a cause that maybe you really do care about, but maybe you personally aren't able to make that impact that really needs to be made. Yeah.
I think that you have to look at your resources. And the resources that we have are time and money and health, right? So when I was young, I had all the time in the world and I had no money, right? I could not give $25,000 to buy a table at a gala. But I had a ton of time where I could sit and I could stuff envelopes and I could make phone calls and I could do, I could set the tables, and there were things that I could do. Now that I'm older and I have more money, I have less time. So it's easier for me to write the check than to sit there stuffing envelopes. And it's probably the better use of my time if I have time not to stuff the envelopes, but to make 5 phone calls to the 5 people who I also know can buy $25,000 tables. And so I think that there's a place for everyone. And I think, is my money worth more than my time? I don't know. It depends on, who you are in the moment. But I think everybody has something to give, and nobody should feel like they're less valuable because they have less money. You might have knowledge, you might have network, you might have time to help, you might have a unique way of looking at something that brings a different kind of solution, and you may have money. There are all kinds of ways where we can contribute to a cause. Sometimes it's just as important to stand out on a street corner on election day and hold up a sign for the person who you care about, because people will see that there's a lot of momentum there, than writing a check in silence. It all just depends. I know plenty of people who are at my stage of life in their mid-40s who have careers and kids and sick parents and who are so busy that they feel guilty that all they do is write a check. As opposed to like actually being out there selling the cupcakes at the school bake sale. Like, everybody feels guilty that they're not doing enough. And I think we should just get rid of that. Because when you start with how can I help, then you also think, how am I not helping? But if you think, what does the problem need? Then it helps you to understand where you can be most effective. And you may say, I'm actually not going to be that effective. I'm actually not going to be that effective with this solution, so I'm going to put my attention elsewhere.
I like that.
And that's okay.
And I really like what you said there, because when you're looking at your resources and you're looking at where you might be able to fit, that one thing you said was, if it doesn't fit, then you look at another direction, look for something else where it can really lend your time. But then also you talked about how important it is to realize that that the things that you do, it's never lesser than someone else. How your value is never lesser than someone else in the sense of what you can bring to a situation, to a cause. And I love that in the sense too that when you look at it, like you said, using your question, no longer asking how can I help, but rather looking at what is the problem, what's the full problem, and then being able to figure out where you can fit. I think automatically there will be a sense of confidence in the work that you will do within that solution, because you then know that whatever you're doing will actually cause some kind of positive effect, and that it will be productive because you know what the full problem is, and now you know where exactly you fit in the solution. I think that's really, really impactful, I must say. So you said something today, and you actually talked about this in your TEDx talk as well. You said we end up crafting elegant, perfectly executed solutions to problems we have misdiagnosed. That is very, that's incredible. Certain things that you say are, So certain things that you say are kind of mind-blowing for me and give me a different perspective when it comes to how I look at problems and solutions. That one quote really does bring it back to that idea of looking at the full problem. But I think people, because we have this impulse to give, we often miss that step of figuring out what the full problem is, and then therefore trying to be a part of the solution. So how can someone figure out, or at least get an idea of the full problem? Because I think that might be a difficult task for some, to figure out, okay, what is the full problem? And then that will help them to maybe, figure out, diagnose that problem and then they can figure out how they can solve it. But how does someone take that first step of diagnosing a problem before they go ahead and, try to solve it?
Yeah, and I think it's really hard in the face of starving children and, beaten animals and, horrible, environmental devastation, to not just want to give, to not say, I can, I'm in my, fat, happy life here, and I can give. Of course I can give. And every pitch that we get is like, look at these starving children in Ethiopia. Like, you can give it for the cost of a sandwich of, a month. You can feed them for life. And, this is how we've been trained to think this way. But it's not working. Like we're not actually fixing, like, what we need to do is we need to feed those kids in Ethiopia, but we also need to help them change their land to make it more arable and help create drainage and irrigation and teach them farming and all of that. So if you're feeling like the problem is so overwhelming, but so if I just do this thing, at least I'll feel good, like, I've done something, yay. We have to educate ourselves. And sometimes that starts with the really uncomfortable notion of realizing that we're wrong, realizing that what we thought was actually the problem isn't actually the problem because we only saw it from our place. So the story that I told at Inbound was, there's an old Indian parable about blind men in a room, and each is asked to name the thing that's in front of them, but of course they can't see it. And the first one steps forward and feels this like long, shiny expanse of the tusk and says it has to be a spear. And the second one feels the rounded ear, feathery ear, and says, oh, it must be a fan. And the third one feels the broad, hard side of the body and says, clearly it's a wall. And each of them are so wrong because they can only see what's in front of them. So we have to step back and we have to see the entirety of the animal. And the only way to do that is to educate ourselves. So it's calling someone up who might be on the other side of the issue. It's calling up the nonprofits that are working in that area. It's reading outside of your Facebook feed or your social media feed about, who's thinking about this. And it's going deeper and challenging, those very notions. We have emotional connections to what we think is right based on mothers and fathers and people of the cloth and teachers and people who we've encountered in our lives. And we feel so certain in that because we know that. But there's facts and there's truths, right? So the fact is that today it is 70 degrees. Now, if you just got off the plane from somewhere where it was 85 degrees, you'd say, oh, it's cold. Right? If you just got the plane from somewhere where it was 20 degrees, you'd say, oh my God, it's so hot. The fact is that it's 70 degrees, but your truth may be that it's hot or cold. Yeah. So we have to stop pursuing truths and we have to start pursuing facts. And the only way to do that is to ask questions and to be okay that we might be wrong. And that as much as I want to serve the Black Lives Matter movement, the Black Lives Matter movement might not want me to serve it.
I think it goes back to perspective in a way, like the way that you look at something, and being able to then be flexible enough to look at something from another direction. Mm-hmm. Like you said, I like that parable that you talked about with the three blind men that felt the elephant and was asked to figure out what it was, and they had all different answers, and you said it was just because they could only see, even though they couldn't see, they could only see what was right in front of them or what they thought was true, and they were
so certain that it's true because, of course, like if you feel it, like it's here, I know it, I'm feeling it, I can touch it.
Yeah. And it's that same thing with pride as well, with that pride and wanting our truth to be the truth. And it's kind of hard to let go of those ideas that maybe we might just be wrong. Like you said, realizing that hard answer that maybe we might just be wrong about this particular thing. And it's our jobs as, people that want to do good in the world, that want, that are connected to a problem and want to find that solution. It's our job to realize that, or to figure out, okay, am I wrong? If I'm wrong, how can I make myself right? How can I make it right in my place?
And especially when we are connecting ourselves as servant leaders to the problem, that becomes our identity. Yeah. So, as I said, when I sold my company and my team, I had this crisis of identity. Like, who am I when I'm no longer CEO of this thing? Here's my business card. And so we all have these crises of identity at different points in our lives. And if part of your identity is I am of service to others, then realizing that the service that you've been doing has either not been useful or has not been as good as you were hoping it to be, or maybe you could have been using your time better, or maybe all of this energy was just action and not impact. That's hard. That's a hard truth to have. So it is, I'm not saying that people should not be serving. I'm saying that if you're going to do it, let's try to be as impactful as we can. And it may be that what you say is, I don't actually care about the long-term solution. I just want to feed those kids. I want to send them teddy bears. I want to help those kids in this moment of need feel better. That's okay too. That's your part of the solution. And we need people in all the different parts of the solution.
But I think, but it's like, it's about that honesty, right? That honesty with yourself. And at the end, if it's not, it shouldn't just be about like making yourself feel good. You honestly just want to make sure that these kids are feeling happy in this time of sadness. You honestly just want to give food because you want this particular person to not be hungry. If it's like that honesty, then I think at that place, that's when you're actually being a part of a solution. Like you're really, it's like, it's not about you anymore. And constantly we're talking about that, how it just shouldn't be about, being selfish. It really shouldn't just be about you. It shouldn't just be about, satisfying your ego. It should be about actually trying to work to really help someone, and not out of ego, but out of just the kindness of your heart and out of the kindness of wanting to make an impact.
Yeah, and at the same time, over the last 25 years, I've given people a lot of career advice, and I would also say to the people who are listening and watching, if you're going to give of yourself, you can also be strategic about it, right? So it may be that serving one cause in a particular way that you can and that it needs may be more helpful and beneficial to you long term than serving this other cause in a way that's beneficial to you and that it needs. So to also think about if, when I would talk to people who would say, well, I want to become the executive director of this organization, I'd say, well, great, why? And if the reason they wanted to become executive director was because they wanted to become executive director, that's really not all that interesting or compelling to me. But if they wanted to become executive director or congressman or senator or president or the chair of the board or whatever, was because they knew from that vantage point they could make the maximal change to the cause or the people or wherever that they wanted to. I'm all in. So, it's okay to be a little self-serving. It's okay to be a little selfish. I call it self-directed with your volunteerism. Yeah. But I think being honest about it is important.
Yeah, honesty. I do like that. And so one other thing I just wanted to discuss was how for me, another reason why I wanted you on the show was because as I've been developing the UV effect and developing what it meant and bringing it to people, I had the fear that people would think that, understanding your unique value and then bringing it to the world in order to make an impact, it's about you. And it's about it's like more personal than it really is. I believe that the UV effect is less personal than people might think. Honestly, I believe that every life that's lived is less about the person that's living it than you might think. That makes sense. Like for me, the life that I'm living is less about me than I initially thought when I was younger. I realize now that my life is far more about other people than it is about myself. And so I wanted people to kind of get an understanding, like with UV effect and understanding your unique value. It's about figuring out what you can do, not just for yourself and not just to build confidence in yourself, but also to give yourself the confidence to bring it to the world and then do things for the world. And so I'm very intrigued, again, by that message that you were bringing, that, myth of self-importance, and making sure that people understand that. And I want you to expand on this point a little bit more for me, but understanding that, that we as people, as a whole, we are very important, but as individuals, there is so much more importance in an individual life than you might think. But it's about how you bring it. I hope this makes sense. My brain is kind of going
it makes total
a lot
sense
of places right now.
If you look at my ninth grader in the cross country team, for example, because he decided to run with the 11th grade pack, two of his friends decided to try to run with the 11th grade pack also. So this confidence, this decision, it's contagious. Yeah, so whenever I speak all over the world about confidence and about leadership and about how to live the best version of your life that you can. And the beginning of my talk, I always ask how many people in the room consider themselves leaders. And, usually like the straight white guys are like, yeah, me. And everyone else is like, no. But here's the thing, we're all leaders. We're all leaders to somebody, whether it's your entire community, whether it's an entire company, whether it's just your little brother. We're all leaders to someone. And there's a responsibility in that. And when you have this confidence and you decide that you can be better and you can do better by yourself, by your family, by your company, by your community, it's contagious. And there is this contagious confidence. So I describe myself as like this confidence catalyst. I'm able to help people find the thing inside of them that gives them confidence and power. And when they find it and they try harder to do the bigger thing that they want, then other people around them suddenly get brave and bold and want to do it too. I ran my first mile of my life about 6 years ago, and I've since become this athlete who's run marathons, and I row competitively, and I do all of this stuff. And I have friends that are like, I never thought I could do it, but because you did it, now I'm doing this, and now I'm doing that. And I've talked, 300-pound people into running marathons, and I mean, just all kinds of crazy things, because when you have the confidence in yourself and you understand your unique value and you understand how that positions you in a place where you can do something in the world that is special and audacious and bold, and it is serving what you want to do, but has this ripple effect around about everyone else around you, and you are the leader to them. So I think it is. I love what you're doing, because we all are leaders to somebody.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's the perfect line right there. We're all leaders to somebody. I think that needs to be recognized, or at least reminded from so many people, because you never know who's watching. So
I have a million friends on Facebook, and I have people who never like anything. They never comment anything. They're like super lurkers, right? Like they don't do anything. And then I'll run into them at a party, and they'll be like, oh my God, I love this that you're doing, and that you're doing, and that you're doing. All the things you're doing are so cool. And I don't know if you know this, but I joined that running group, and I was like, that's amazing. That's so great. And for 6 months they've been running, and they're getting ready for their first marathon. And so you have no idea of the impact that you're making on other people. So you got to go out and just figure out who you are and what gives you power and what gives you confidence and where you're special. And then be that person, live into that person with everything you have, and grab every breath you have, because why not, right? Why not?
Absolutely. I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate the insight that you had. You packed so much in. I am so appreciative of it. Just saying, I've made so many notes. I'm going to be watching this over again, making more notes.
Well, I went to my annual physical, and I said to my doctor, everything is great. I'm healthy. Things are terrific. I don't take any medication. Life is good. But I feel like I have to sleep the amount of 3 people. And she was like, well, that's good, because you live the amount of 2. So that makes a lot of sense.
I'm the same way. I totally agree. Always sleeping. Yeah. Okay. But I did want to say, before I closed off, I actually almost forgot. I wanted to make sure I gave you a chance to add any information that you wanted to share. Maybe you talk about your book before we close off.
So I'm actually working on a second book that's going to be called The Myth of Self-Importance. And it's all about this question. But mostly, if people want to see what I'm up to, they can check out the consulting and the executive coaching that I'm doing at limitlesspossibility.com. And if they want to see the writing and the speaking, I do a lot of speaking to women's groups, to schools, to innovators, to anybody who's trying to figure out how to grab onto that voice and really kind of have the life that they want to have. And that's at GassnerOtting.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to have all of your links down below. Any and all social media will be down there as well. Please be sure to check her out. Hopefully, do you have a mailing list or anything so they can be updated when your book comes out or anything?
Yeah. So if they go to either of those websites, they can sign up for the mailing list.
Awesome. And be sure to do that, because honestly, I'm just so glad to have had you on the show, and you brought a focus to the show and a shift to the show that had not been brought before, a way of looking at yourself, way of looking at life in a way that we haven't really had on the show quite yet. And so I really appreciate you being here, sharing your insight and your knowledge. Yeah. And all best of luck, of course. And again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Keep kicking butt.
All right, bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the UV Effect podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Miss Youre Gassner, and I hope that you enjoyed her message. And if you did, be sure to head over to GabrielleJordanInspires.com/037 to check out Youre Gassner's podcast episode page. And on there, you can scroll down and you can find her information. You'll find her social media, her website, her book, all of that. Find out ways to connect with her on that page. And also, while you're there, be sure to leave a comment of letting us know how you liked the show. And you can also listen to some of the other episodes on that website. You can also do that on iTunes. Leave a comment, listen to some episodes, as well as rate us. Also, be sure to head over to Instagram and follow us at the UV Effect to check out upcoming episodes, quotes from this episode. I keep saying episode, as well as some fun behind the scene clips that we post on the Insta story. Again, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you'll join me next Tuesday for another episode of the UV Effect podcast. All right, see you then.